You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He is hit. He's got him again! They've got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles!
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to episode 203 or 2 of Flipping the Birds.
Definitely.
I fumbled that one. 3, okay. 203 of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett. And we're back today to talk about possible cornerbacks, go over a little bit of Hassan Reddick talk, Devontae Smith extension. But first and foremost, man, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. Like, I'm excited to get to this draft. I feel like the more the closer we get, the more options in my brain the Eagles really have. I think that it's going to be an exciting one. I think like round one, I don't know. Like, I just feel like it feels similar to last year's draft, where we think in our head we know what the Eagles are going to do, and at the end of the day, they kind of did what was expected, but it turned out way different than we thought it was. So I don't know. I'm excited, and yeah, I mean, like, this team's kind of shaping up. I think the couple of things we're going to talk about today, they got to address, but if they do, I think they're in a good spot.
And it kind of feels like, usually like with the draft, you're looking at guys who are going to make us a simple impact this season and more significant impact long term. But it kind of feels like first round, second round, like these are guys that can actually make potential instant impacts this season. That's what you're looking for and you're digging for from the cornerback position, linebacker, even possibly adding an offensive lineman to kind of solidify the rotation or the depth per se.
Yeah, man. Like, it's been a while. I think, obviously, Jordan Davis had some impact and Jalen Carter really came off to a hot start. But, it's been a while since we've seen, an Eagle have to take a big leap in their first year. So it's worked out for the Eagles. So I think, again, they set themselves up nicely where a guy can come in and play, an impact rotational role and kind of ease himself into the NFL. And, I mean, shoot, there's some changes in the NFL as well that maybe we can even address too with the tackling and the special team stuff. But
how do you feel about that? Because you're a defensive guy, so like the hip drop tackle. I mean, is it like necessarily like needed to go away? Is it kind of one of those things that's like shit? Like how do we play the game now around this issue?
yeah, it's tough, man. Like, I think I often don't agree with him. Well, not often, but I definitely don't agree with him sometimes. But I think Ryan Clark kind of put it pretty well, man. It's just like over the last 4 years, lower body injuries have decreased, right? We've seen the lowest last year, the last 4 years, what he said. And so I'm kind of just wondering, like, who asked for this, right? Like, it wasn't obviously, Mark Andrews going down on one of these tackles is massive, right? I understand, but if we're going to change rules because, one player or two players get hurt over the span of a season, like it's really tough to stand by that standard. Like, and, that kind of tackle, like what he talked about is that indecision and indecisiveness costs more injuries than those kind of tackles. And so you're going to have defenders, not knowing how to tackle, to second guess themselves, and then they're caught flat-footed and just getting run over and stuff like that, right? So I don't really know if they're thinking about the long-term effects, and definitely makes it harder for defensive guys to tackle. But that being said, there are ways to tackle that aren't as dangerous, and I understand why they're pushing that towards it. But, like, for example, you look at other professional leagues like the CFL, like, they're not even considering those kind of things. So for the NFL to be the leaders and for what people thought were a long time to be kind of the hard hitters and the top level, to see them dial it back, it kind of sucks, because I think it's only really the start. And I mean, the kickoff rules, I feel like kickoffs, like, the days of Devin Hester are gone, man. Like, like year in, year out.
As exciting as they used to be, definitely.
Yeah, like it seems like there's less kickoff returns for touchdowns, less big kickoffs. Obviously, like they're not changing punts, and so that was still a big one. Obviously, that hurt the Eagles in their last Super Bowl and stuff like that. But yeah, man, I feel like kickoffs were it was kind of time. It was kind of written in the stars it was coming. So that one surprised me a bit less. But the hip drop tackle, man, like you see all these videos, right? Like the thing is I see is like you see all these videos breaking it down in slow motion, and you're like, oh, this is illegal, and I get it, but like speed that thing up, man, and try and catch Tyreek Hill and not hip drop. Like obviously he's not a big guy, you probably don't have to, but like some of these guys are running at 23 miles per hour or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Or whatever they're measuring, right? Like it's really hard to consciously think I can't do this when you're tackling someone from the behind and you're trying to catch up to them. So it's a really tough situation you're putting defenders in, man.
It's a very interesting situation if you're looking at it from the Eagles' perspective, right? Like they just signed significant money for a running back that makes a lot of guys already miss on a regular. So like you're looking at defenses actually attacking this Eagles offense, and it's like, okay, you're excited. But I mean, I think the best way to look at it is like, offenses and touchdowns put the ass in the seats, right? And defenses, they win championships. Now, it kind of narrows the ability for a defender to be that elite now. Like you have to be strategically like just sound as a defense to actually like go around these kind of penalties now. It does suck, but at the same time I get it because at the end of the day, like it's about what it's about scoring touchdowns, right? Like, if you hear Saquon Barkley breaking off a couple tackles for a touchdown, like that's a ESPN top 10 sports center stuff, and that's highlights and that's excitement. And that means, more fans are excited to watch the Eagles play in person or whatever the case may be. I mean, the NFL is not losing money one way or another, but I doubt it's about safety. I think it's more so about money. It's about, putting the ass in the seats and keeping them there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you make a good point too, right? Like we talk about, the NFL wanting more highlights. It's not the guy that gets the most tackles at the end of the year that wins defensive MVP, right? So realistically, tackles matter less than the big splash plays like interceptions and sacks, right? And they're not dialing back. So like obviously, the hip drop tackles not happen very often in the pocket, right? You're not allowed to hit the quarterback low. So they're not limiting the big plays. And so again, like when they're looking at defensive plays and when they want to keep, like I don't think that those are highlight real tackles, right? And so unfortunately, like it's similar. Like I think it's similar. Like they're having the conversation about the tush push, right? And it's just like I would honestly, I'd rather see the tush push go than them limit tackles more, to be honest. Because
really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know it's the Eagles, and like it's definitely been advantageous, but I want to see football, man. I like football. I don't want to watch the Eagles play flag football. I don't want to watch the Eagles play touch football. I want to watch them play football. And so, again, like this specific type of tackle, I don't know how often it's going to affect the game. We're not sure if this is going to be like an every game call. Apparently, it happens twice a game, these kind of tackles. So
okay, so it's not terrible. I mean, not taking out a significant part of the game.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, I assume it's going to be a UR, right? So that's a 15-yarder. If that's happening once a game, man, that's too much. Then they need to dial it back. Whereas if they're calling this, if it happens, in 10 games and over the course of a season, not a big deal, right? So yeah. I'm not really sure. We're going to have to go through the season and see what it looks like, but
you just gotta hope that the referees are not gonna be nitpicking these kind of tackles. Like, hey, that's a tackle and it just looks similar. Like, I think that's where the NFL has to kind of like nip in the bud because these referees have been too much
controlling games, right?
Yeah, they've been the ringleaders of the circus. Best way to put it. Like, and that's not. I mean, I don't go to the games to watch a referee.
100%.
Like, I don't care about what they think. At the end of the day, like, I want to see these guys ball out and fight at the end. Like, that's the whole point of this gladiator style sport. Like, you want to see these guys battle. I get the hip drop tackle. I get minimizing the injuries in the game. You don't want to see again to relate it to the Eagles. You don't want to see Saquon get tackled that way and then out for the season. And you're like, shit, like there goes our running back, whatever case may be. Right. And you see the way sometimes the running quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. You don't want to see them get tackled in that manner and actually lose them for a season because again, that's money lost. Like the NFL's stream of money is based on these guys going big. So I think it's about amplifying the offense and it's about narrowing the. I don't know how to put it for the defense. It sucks for defenders though. It definitely sucks.
I think it's like what I hope is that it's not like when they implemented taunting rules and like now taunting rules, they don't necessarily, I think everyone's kind of gotten it. The referees have bitten the whistle a couple times, but like the first year that they implemented taunting rules, we were getting one like almost every play. I don't know if you remember. I think it was was it Sean Bradley got one or
It was
yeah,
everything, bro. Like, it was
drive
terrible.
killer, right? And like a terrible situation. It wasn't even that bad. So I really hope that it's not like that. I hope the NFL's kind of learned their lesson and saying like, okay, we're going to implement it, but we don't want it called very often, as opposed to the taunting rule, which was like, we're going to implement it and we want to see it called every opportunity you can.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be one of those things that we don't see as often. I would hate for the game to start being controlled by these stupid penalties, and then we got to hear the reports that it's going to be reviewed in the offseason, and it's possibly that it's a 1-year thing, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, I get you want to perfect the product. I get you want to. It's about the kids as well, right? It's about these kids growing up and getting into these sports, and you want them to behave, or you want them to play the game in a specific manner in the future. I understand that, but at the same time, like, it's one of the most prolific sports in America because of how rough it is. I mean, to be honest, like, the fact that you can put on a helmet and some shoulder pads and knock the other opposing team's quarterback loose, it's a great feeling. I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think there's opportunities for defenses to make plays. Like I don't think that this kind of tackle is like the be all end all if you get rid of it. But I just really hope that the referees aren't nitpicking too much. And like, I mean, like, we're getting comments in the chat. Like, the criteria is it feels like the criteria for COVID, man. Like, it just like there's new symptoms of it every week, and
they don't know how to attack it, so they're just making things up as they go.
Yeah, it's very specific, but we'll see how it shapes out. It sucks that we gotta like take time to like even talk about this, because it's like, come on, man, it's football. At the end of the day, unfortunately, injuries are part of the game, and we want to avoid them as much as possible. But
it's football. Like, it's a gladiator sport. It's not basketball. Like, this is football. So, obviously a couple things we do need to talk about. One thing I definitely overlooked, and that actually came up in the chat. I'm not sure if you watched the Jeffrey Lurie press conference today, or Nick Sirianni, but CJ Calibret was asking right now what everybody thinks of Jeff Lurie's conference. Sounds like Nick never had a chance of being fired. A lot of praise for his body of work since he became the head coach. I've been negative Nick for quite some time since the season. I think since last season, just because I feel like he was on an incredible Super Bowl high, and he got very arrogant. But Jeffrey Lurie pretty much, he stated like, hey, like, I get that Nick acts up on the sidelines. I completely understand that. We've told him, you got to behave in a certain manner, but he's growing in his position. He's growing, to be a better coach at the end of the day. He's very self-critical of himself. Hearing that, like, you just hearing that right now from my mouth, I mean, how do you feel about Nick Sirianni going into the season? I'll definitely give my thoughts after you, but I'm curious to know where you stand with Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea that he was going to get fired after a season like that, I never really bought into that. I think you're absolutely correct. There's definitely some things he had to work on. Realistically, it was kind of his first opportunity to reset, right, and kind of grow from internally and hire the people he wanted again, right. And I think that he just he got it right the first time. He had a really good staff the first time, and I think he had the same kind of trust in his coaching staff this time, and it didn't work out. And I don't think that that's necessarily an indication that him as a coach, but I think maybe that means that he's going to get extra help. Clearly he got extra help in the hiring process this time, but just extra help with those little things. And I think that that's an indication of what's to come. Is I think, similar that we talk about Howie Roseman, you talk about Howie Roseman, more than 5-6 years ago, but when he was going through it, right? Like we weren't going to give him a second chance, and Jeff Lurie gave him a second chance, and now he's probably one of, if not the best GM in football at the moment, right? So I think Nick Sirianni is in the similar boat. Like there's always going to be things that irk you, and we talked about it during the season. Is like there's not that many dudes that emulate Philly better than Nick Sirianni, and again, a city that has its flaws and all that stuff, but it's about the passion, it's about the love of the Eagles, it's about the love of the team, it's about the love of sports, and some of that needs to be corralled and some of that needs to be corrected. But I don't think firing him was ever really in the cards. If this season goes poorly with the roster he has, I think you probably give him one more year. But I can't see this team going 4-13.
And then before I get my statement, Jeffrey Lurie also threw a tidbit in there saying that Nick was hell bent on getting Vic Fangio to be the guy. and he's the one that actually brought Kellen Moore to the Eagles. Like, he was hell-bent on making sure that Kellen Moore was going to be the guy for the Eagles. He was a big fan of Kellen Moore's offense, and Jeffrey Lurie kind of just signed off on it and let it happen. I know how we feel about those signings, right? But how do you feel about hearing that, Nick is, kind of saw his mistakes from last season and actually went for the cream of the crop of this offseason, pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly kind of what you want to hear, right? Similar to, like, Howie Roseman wants a guy, he goes and gets him. Like, I feel like, Bryce Huff was number one on his list. He went and got him, right? So you want to hear the same from the coaching staff. Clearly they're on the same page, or at least, working towards the same goal. And I think people forget just how creative and innovative the offense could be with Nick Sirianni being, well, again, we don't know what his involvement was, but it seems like, let kind of Brian Johnson do a bit more this year than, and he was more involved with Shane Steichen. And, we again, Shane Steichen was very successful with the Colts, and obviously he has a brilliant mind himself, but I think that Nick Sirianni really is a great offensive mind. And so if he likes Kellen Moore, there's definitely a reason. He's not just, doing that on a whim. He's watched film. He's understood the concept. He's seen a playbook. So it makes sense to me. Oh, I can't hear you anymore, bro.
Yeah, sorry. Mute button was definitely on. I was going to say, shout out to Zach for popping on this, and maybe you could give us a little bit of your tidbit as well as to where we stand with Nick Sirianni. I mean, I'm negative Nick for a reason, right? Like, it just feels like this upcoming season, the only reason that this season can go bad, in my opinion, is obviously injuries is a factor, right? But if Nick Sirianni somehow, some way f's this whole thing up, like, you have the silver platter on the table right now. You have a great running back. You have probably two top 10 wide receivers on your team, one of the top 5 QBs on your team, one of the top 5 tight ends on your team, probably the top 5 offensive line as well. Defensively, I get it. It's a project. It's, you're restructuring, you're rebuilding, you're starting from the ground up per se. But offensively, and I said this last season, I expected the offense to overcompensate for the defense, and that didn't happen. There was a huge disconnect. This season, it just feels like if anything goes bad this season, it's 1,000% on Nick, because you have everything you need to succeed. How do you feel about the Nick Sirianni talk from Jeffrey Lurie, Zach?
Yeah. First off, what's up, everybody? Better 20 minutes late than never, I guess. But as far as Nick Sirianni goes, I'm not worried about it. This guy is 2 years removed from taking this team to the Super Bowl. Obviously, what's up, Davey? How you doing? Obviously, last year was it was terrible. Like, there's no two ways to hide that. But coaches are supposed to coach, and he didn't do that like he's supposed to. Players are supposed to play. The players didn't do that like they're supposed to. There's really not just one person who you can chalk up all the failures of last season to. They won as a team to start the year, and they lost as a team to end it. So as far as entering this season, I mean, so far Nick Sirianni has showed that he's willing to do what it takes to hopefully make a change. People talk about him being kind of a puppet and a yes man, and just doing what Doug didn't do. I don't know that makes him a puppet and a yes man. I think that makes him a guy who's willing to make changes when what he's doing isn't working.
I'm willing to keep his job.
Well, sure, but some people would call that adapting. Like, that's
no, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a bad thing to have. Like, if I want to keep my job, I'm gonna adapt and
no, for sure. But even beyond the threat of losing your job, like, people were always talking about, last season, why isn't the team doing anything different? Why aren't they mixing up? Why are they still running the stupid vanilla offense? Well, now he's looking to adapt, and he's getting shit for that too. So, he can't win effectively, and it's a bad position to be in, and that's just the position of leadership. That's how it always is. And on top of that too, you're the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. You're the guy who they look to for failure or success. So until this team starts winning, that's going to be the narrative around him, and potentially even around this team, although with the new players, it is getting a lot more exciting. I have no real worries going into the new season with Nick Sirianni, and that's on all levels, as far as the offense, all the Big Dom stuff about checking his emotions and everything like that. I don't give a crap about that. Listen, this is football. We want people to be passionate, okay? Not everybody has to be Bill Belichick, and I'd recommend most people don't act like Bill Belichick. I think that was kind of a 1 in a million scenario, not really something people should aspire to be. So I don't mind that he wears his heart on his sleeve. I don't mind that he's passionate. I don't mind that he's adapting now. Again, this is a guy who has taken you to the playoffs multiple times and to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So I think we're going to be looking at an improvement in performance from him, hopefully from Jalen Hurts, because Hurts didn't play as well as we expected last year. Part of that's on the offensive scheme. Part of that's on the injury. Part of that's on him for taking a step back. So really need everybody as a unit, and we can go on and on talking about how everybody failed throughout the season. I feel like we have over past pods. It's going to take every single unit, every single player, every single coach to step up to actually make some marketable change. I have a good feeling about that this year, though.
Fair. That's very fair. Something that
Davey, you do not come at me or my people, including Big Dom. So watch it there.
something that might excite more. I don't know if you stumbled upon this on Instagram yet, Morgan, but Jeffrey Lurie did not speak about Hassan Reddick. His exact quote was, "He's, by the way, a terrific player, great person, great background in Philadelphia. It'll play itself out in a very good way."
Mhm.
As a fan, as an analyst, if I'm hearing the owner of a football team talk about a player in that manner, saying it's going to play out in a very good way, it seems like more likely than not, Hassan Reddick is going to stay and is going to get that extension that we all hope he does, because he is probably he's their best pass rusher on defense right now.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the report that the Eagles are asking for a second, and that just indicates to me that they're not willing to get rid of him unless the team kind of blows their socks off. And I just don't think, unless it happens during the draft, and even honestly, like, I understand his value. I think that teams would be pretty bold to offer the Eagles a second round pick after just kind of seeing what teams are willing to dish out. I think even just considering the draft, a second round pick in this draft is a starter for a lot of teams, right? So as much as he is of value to the Eagles and would be to any organization, I think that the second, that indicates to me that he'll be a Philadelphia Eagle. It's just a matter of figuring out whether or not they're going to give him a new contract and what that looks like. But I mean, it seems as if he'll be in midnight green unless, again, the Eagles are getting a second round pick. And that means, potentially another starter for the Eagles that's going to be here for at least 4 years. So, I mean, either way, seems like it's a positive for the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't really see any reason that they should be looking for anything less than the sky. You look at the Brian Burns deal, obviously, and that's something that's going to draw a lot of comparison to it. And I think most people would agree that Burns is a higher quality level of player than Hassan Reddick. But when you look at it through Philadelphia's lens, and mind you, I want to open with this because what I'm going to say after it's going to sound really callous in business, but I want Hassan Reddick to get paid. I want them to find a mutually beneficial deal where he's earning more money and is rewarded for what he's done. At the same time, it does not put Philadelphia in an irresponsible position. With that being said, you look
There's
at
no
Philadelphia's
Super Bowl without
position.
Hassan Reddick. Just put
There's
that
no
out there.
For sure. And he's a local guy. He's been fantastic for the Eagles in his 2 seasons with the team. I think that anybody would want Hassan to stay with Philadelphia for a good long while going forward. That being said, you look at their position. There's no need to move Hassan Reddick, right? There's no exactly even trade demand. They've just requested to seek permission. Reddick and the Eagles are still trying to iron out a deal. He wants to stay in Philadelphia if they'll pay him, right? So there's no malcontent trade demand. On top of that, you're talking about dealing a player of value. And now back to the Brian Burns trade. Burns, again, I think we all agree is a higher level of player. But when you're looking at it through the Eagles lens and you're looking at the stats that both of these players have put up, Hassan Reddick 4 times over his career has finished the season with 10 or more sacks. Brian Burns has done that once, right? And now Burns obviously is an immensely better run defender. than Hassan Reddick is. On top of that, you're talking about a guy who's playing on there's a little bit of talent on the Panthers D-line, but it's still the Panthers, so you're looking at a lot of double teams against Brian Burns versus a much more versatile Eagles defensive line. Taking all that away, again, Reddick's gotten double digits 4 times. Brian Burns has done it once. You want value out of this guy. You're not just going to settle for whatever the highest bidder is willing to give, as long as it's a top 100 pick or something like that. You need real quality coming out of this deal if you're going to trade him, because again, the Eagles don't want to lose him. So Brian Burns earns, I think it was a second and a fifth. Is that right? I fully understand them asking for a second. I'm not expecting that to be a top 40 pick. I would probably characterize that more so as a top 60 pick, and I understand that is still high. It's perfectly within Philadelphia's asking to request a pick so high, and on top of that, it gives them time to try and figure out maybe there is a deal to bring back Hassan Reddick going forward. So really, it's a shame that it's still kind of at that stalemate. I think that Harry Rosen's put the Eagles in a good position to either get a quality asset in return for Hassan Reddick, or just wait him out and bring him back at a price that's a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, I think I was reading something where if they extend, and this I don't know where I stumbled upon it, so do forgive me. Where if they did extend Hassan Reddick, they free up 11 mil this season in cap space, which would bring them up to close to 40 mil once again, which Justin Simmons is right there, is waiting for Eagles to sign. But yeah, I think I think we're on the same page that Hassan Reddick should stay, because I feel like, one, there was no past Super Bowl without Hassan Reddick's play, and I don't think there's a future Super Bowl this season without Hassan Reddick, especially with a defense that needs an elite pass rusher like him.
Well,
yeah.
On top of that, too, what does the pass rushing situation look like in years going forward? Josh Sweat is in his last year with the team. Brandon Graham's in his last year with the team. So if you're able to lock Reddick up for a couple more years into the future, that buys you some time to develop some guys in the draft, some guys like Nolan Smith, who is a little bit behind the 8 ball, a little bit more than a little bit behind the 8 ball. So, these are players at a position of extreme importance, especially if you're Philadelphia. You want to be able to maintain talent on that edge. You're going to be in some big trouble. Obviously, they just signed Bryce Huff, but we're talking about a part-time player who's expanding his role. There's a little bit of risk in that too, and I have faith that he'll be able to produce this year. But even so, that doesn't mean that there's no risk. So you want to be able to be confident not only in the present but in years going forward.
Completely agree. So yeah, I mean, we kind of discussed recent Eagles news. Now it's time to look at the Eagles' future. We do have the draft coming up. We are going to be taking segments every week and covering different positions, from cornerback, linebacker, tight end, offensive line, the whole ordeal. But this week is actually going to be cornerbacks, which is Zach and Morgan's forte, because I'm terrible at defense. But they both know that I've been screaming to the mountaintop that I want Nate Wiggins on this defense as my cornerback of the future, unless they're trading for Patrick Surtain. But first and foremost, Eagles have a history of not going cornerback or safety in the first round. It's been offensive line, defensive line, until it wasn't when they drafted Devontae Smith. Is this going to be this draft where it's kind of like, hey, no, we got our offensive linemen, we got our defensive linemen, we could actually wait a little bit more deeper in the round, deeper in the draft, and then do they hit their mark and actually go for a cornerback? And is it 100% a necessity for them to do so?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's really going to depend on how the draft falls. And I think, that obviously that's a cliche answer, but I really don't think the Eagles are in a position to reach for a corner. So, you kind of talk about this cornerback draft having a big 3, a big 5, maybe, if, you get a run on corners, could be up to 5, I think, drafted in the first round, most likely not. But if you're adding the top of the second round, I think it's easily 5, if not more. So I think it's really going to depend on where those top 3 go. If it's early on, I think that means that there's edge rushers being pushed down the board. There's offensive linemen being pushed down the board. And I think that makes as much sense for the Eagles as drafting a corner in the first round. Obviously, you're talking about the visits they've been having, and a lot of them have been with linemen. I don't think the MO changes for Howie Roseman. So I think, if the cards kind of, or the stars kind of align, and Howie's got, a card in the back pocket, it might be a corner this year. Realistically, I think on paper, that's probably a position that helps them not only this year but into the future. So they have to address it at some point. So why not this year? I think that this is an underrated cornerback class, but I really do think it's going to be a matter of best player available at one of those positions, if it's not offensive line, defensive line, or cornerback. Although they have been meeting with a lot of linebackers too, so who knows?
They haven't meeting with a lot of linebackers. I think you're right. I don't think that necessarily means they will go corner, because they're definitely not taking a linebacker in the first round, although I'm sure that there's a lot of people who'd be pretty happy with that. But real quick before I go to my point, Morgan, you talked a lot about the top 3 of the top 5. Just out of curiosity, where does Cooper DeJean fit within your top 3, top 5? And also, is he even a corner to you?
I think he's probably 4 or 5. I don't think he's better than my top 3 are Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, and Nate Wiggins. I think that's pretty standard across the board. Obviously, Kool-aid McKinstry fits into that too. It really depends on the defense you're playing. I think that the reason why I would give the leg up for Cooper DeJean for the Eagles is his versatility and just his intelligence. I think you really have to be a smart player to play in this defense. So I think that's seen as definitely a bonus. So I think that maybe he sneaks into that 4, but I think he doesn't crack the top 3.
Yeah, I would agree. He doesn't crack the top 3. If we are talking about him as a corner, I agree. He's probably that 4, just ahead of Kool-Aid. But the biggest thing that I agree with you on is that I think of him more kind of as that chess piece defensively. So that's part of the reason why I'll be just flat honest. He's not my pick in the first round. Not that I'd have anything against him, depending on what slot they are when they pick him, if they pick him. But that being said, he's a guy that you can really kind of move around a lot. Not too dissimilar in a sense to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, although the play styles are a little bit better, but just that functionality of positional versatility is similar, which is really intriguing to have 2 of those guys. But that being said, it's again, he's just not at the top of my list. Brian, you were saying?
Is he? I mean, forgive me for saying this, because this sounds awfully familiar, and it's a little bit of PTSD. He's not this class's version of Jalen Reagor, right? Like, because everybody was hyped on Jalen Reagor being the speedster, being this awesome steal in the draft, and they got him, and it ends up being crap in the bed.
Well, I think more so when you look at defensive pieces, if you're talking about guys who can move around the field a little bit, it's just a little more realistic. I think it was a bit more of a fad, that concept of those gadget offensive pieces, and there are still guys who can do it. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's doing it at a very high level. There's expectations for Saquon Barkley to do that offensively, but there was kind of a rash of guys, Laviska Shenault, there's a lot of those around that time, those wide receiver running back hybrids who I think people fell more in love with the concept that wasn't quite proven yet. I would personally say no. I just think that you look at a guy who has a bit higher of a football IQ than Jalen Reagor does, first and foremost, but in addition to that, I just think defensively, there's just a lot more proof of concept as far as those kind of versatile defensive backs.
Yeah, I think no matter where he ends up and in what position, he's going to be a contributor. He's too smart of a player, and honestly, I think that his athleticism is underrated. I think he's a really good athlete as well. What I would worry about him is, one, his ceiling is, I think that his ceiling might be like a Harrison Smith type player where, he's got that versatility, really athletic, and figures out a way to stick. But I do worry about that kind of Isaiah Simmons factor where, he ends up on a team that doesn't really know what to do with him. He sits there, clearly has potential, but they just doesn't fit, gets traded, and then just kind of lost 3 years of his career and doesn't really, know what to do from there. But, the Eagles is an organization where I think they find a way for him. I think if the Eagles didn't have Reed Blankenship on the roster, this would be a home run pick. Like, it just would make so much sense. But he's probably a safety or a slot corner, maybe a cornerback for the Eagles. But you already kind of have those players, so it'd just be interesting to see where he fits. It might be hard for him to get playing time, but I mean, when you add a player like that, you're making your team better, regardless of where he fits.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at certain teams that may have the expectation of kind of pigeonholing him, expecting a shutdown corner on the outside, that's not going to be Cooper DeJean, more than likely. Not to say that he can't, because, again, he's got a rather high ceiling. That's not my expectation, just knowing what I know about him. So in a place like Philadelphia, I do expect them to be able to take advantage of you mentioned Isaiah Simmons earlier, and we saw the Giants kind of unlock him a little bit, and we would expect Deshaun to be a bit higher level of a player. But even still, I do think that you're looking at a situation in Philadelphia where they can do that. But Philadelphia also has that need for that pure, whether it's a shutdown corner or just an elite offensive or rather elite outside corner presence. And that's just not Cooper, in my opinion.
Fair. So walk me through the prospects of this draft, right? So obviously every shutdown corner is not a ball hawk, right? You have shutdown corners who in college they don't have many interceptions, but then you have your ball hawks who are always where the ball is going to be, and they're great at that. Who are the guys that you feel like coming into the league are going to be the next Patrick Surtains, the Jair Alexanders, and who probably do you feel like, in your opinion, fits the Eagles more this time around?
Well, it's a really interesting question because I think that the number one corner off the board may not be the best fit for the Eagles, and also might not be the best corner when it's all said and done. Like for me, I think the top corner off the board is most likely going to be Quinyon Mitchell. I think you look at that physicality. You look at the athleticism. Like if you're gonna watch a highlight tape of one of the corners in this draft, his is the most exciting by far. He has that kind of Sauce Gardner-esque attitude about him. He's physical at the catch point. He does some ridiculous things, and he's a mean dude. He's kind of a dickhead, which you like on defense. Like you really want that. The problem is he's not Sauce Gardner. He's not going to get that same kind of treatment from the referees in the NFL. He's still pretty raw. He needs time to develop. So if the Eagles, feel that they can let him sit and develop, I think he'd be a home run pick. But I really do think he's going to be the first corner off the board. Again, similar to Deonte Banks last year, I think Deonte Banks obviously a bit more refined. But when you get a corner who's so athletic and physical, it just shines through. And eventually, teams are going to kind of go down their list of boxes, and he's just going to check so many of them. It's hard to pass up. I think for me, Terrion Arnold is the best corner in this draft. I think he's going to be the best corner. The problem with him is, probably looks a little bit better in the slot than he does on the outside. Probably a bit better of a man cover than a zone coverage guy. Not saying he can't, get better at that. It was mostly his eyes that kind of let him down. He just has to be a bit more disciplined. But I think overall, all around, he's by far the best corner. I think that he's probably going to have the best career. And then you talk about Nate Wiggins, probably the best fit for the Eagles, the longest of them, probably has the clearly has the best speed, but probably also has the best ability to kind of attack the football. I see, a lot of his stats came from kind of bad throws and all that stuff, but there's a certain point where you get so many of those, you have to kind of attribute the defensive player. There's something to be said for being in the right place at the right time, and so he kind of has a knack for that. I think that his ball skills aren't quite as good as Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold. Again, Quinyon Mitchell, man, like at the catch point is a monstrosity, man. I do not want to see that guy within 5 yards of me if I'm catching a football. So I think that's kind of how it shakes down for me. So I think if you end up with any of those guys, they'd be great fits, but just kind of what they bring to the Eagles would look a little different. I think Quinyon Mitchell probably, might be the most appealing. I think Terrion Arnold is probably the best and the most refined, but I think Nate Wiggins is probably the best fit.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree on several of those points. So first and foremost, I do agree.
Whoa! Your mock draft has Nate Wiggins, so you can't disagree with any of those.
Hold on.
No. You already did a mock draft.
You're gonna like what I have to say.
Okay.
You're gonna like what I have to say. Just hold on.
Right. Okay.
First and foremost, right? So you talk about the first corner going in the draft. I agree that that's most likely going to be Quinyon Mitchell. I think that the reason that is because he is the best corner in this draft. Now, I understand he's a bit of a fast riser. He doesn't have quite, the Alabama pedigree that Arnold has. And I understand that he's going to be a bit more of a, not necessarily a feast or famine, but he's going to get burnt on occasion on not necessarily routes, but more so just trying to play the ball too aggressively. He's occasionally aggressive to a fault. And again, I do like that, but it is aggressive a little bit to a fault. My concern with Arnold, I'm a bit worried that you're looking at a very common trend that we've seen with Eagles corners in the past, and that's guys who are susceptible to double moves. I'm a bit worried about the feet. I'm a bit worried. You mentioned, the eyes as well, but I just think that he has a tendency to lose his man, and he doesn't have the long speed to make up for those mistakes. I still think he's going to be a fantastic corner in this league, a starting corner for years to come. It's not like I'm not calling him a bust or anything like that. That's why I don't have him as my top corner in this draft. It's just, again, I'm so worried. I've been burned so many times in the past. Maybe I'm overreacting, but just that susceptibility to the double move is my biggest concern. When you're talking about Arnold. That being said, I do agree that Nate Wiggins is the best fit for the Philadelphia Eagles. Part of the reason that is, I think they're going to be able to get him without giving up any additional assets, which is great. I love that concept. But on top of that, yes, the long speed is incredibly impressive. I know that people are going to want a bit sexier defender in terms of turnover potential, and I just don't think that guy's Nate Wiggins. He very much focuses on denying the ball. We talked about the difference between a shutdown corner and a ball hawk. He's really a shutdown corner. He's not going to be a guy who's going to rack up like 6+ interceptions in a season. I'm perfectly okay with that. I want a guy that you can leave on an island. I want a guy who they're going to avoid throwing that direction. That is what I'm looking for in a corner. And I think that that's Nate Wiggins. So that is why he's a perfect fit in Philadelphia for me. I would love to get Kenyon Mitchell. If the Eagles do trade up and draft him, I think that's fantastic. I do agree that I don't think they're going to sit him for a bit, even though they do like what they've seen from Ringo. But even still, I do agree that he's going to need a bit of time to figure some stuff out. Whereas Nate Wiggins, he's not going to be an all-pro for a season, but I think he's going to be a bit more of an impactful player right out of the gate, assuming that he's healthy. We haven't really heard much about this groin injury that he sustained at the combine. It seems, unless you guys have heard anything, it just seems it was kind of a one-off. He sounds okay to me. So I'm not expecting, really anything too negative from that long-term. So if Philadelphia is able to draft Nate Wiggins, yes, Brian, I did make him the first-round pick in my latest mock draft. And it's for good reason. He's a really talented player and would love to see him in Eagles green.
And he ran a 4.28. I mean,
on a bad groin, popping that groin halfway through.
And I think Eagles have an advantage if you get a guy like Nate Wiggins, where you have Darius Slay probably for just for this season, but still the mentorship that could go on and the leadership that could go on in that secondary. I know a lot of people are off.
And really teach him a lot about social media. Yeah, it'd be great.
I knew that was coming. I know a lot of people are off about Slay's antics off the field, right? But you got to give him credit.
He was a lot better last season than people acted like he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to get that out after the hate.
Yeah, he played very well last season. I think Wiggins having a player like that in his corner and then growing with Keely Ringo, like you mentioned, that's just a recipe for success for the Eagles, which we haven't seen in a long time at the cornerback position. They heavily invest in the D-line, they heavily invest in the offensive line, but for years the cornerbacks have damaged us in our playoff runs. I mean, in the damn Super Bowl, they let up close like 500 something yards for Tom Brady, right? So it's kind of like one of those things where it's about time, just like it was about time that they drafted a wide receiver in the first round when they took Devontae Smith. It's about time for them to go for the corner and get the right guy. Now we spoke about the right guy, right? The guy with the right fit for Philly. Who are the red flags that Philadelphia themselves need to avoid at all costs when it comes to false advertisement for the cornerbacks?
I don't think, because there's not that number one corner, there's not really that corner being pushed. I'd say again, I don't really think it's a red flag. I think just that Kenyon Mitchell is farther away than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people are going to come in and expect him to be, again, Sauce Gardner. I don't think he's there yet. Again, if you're watching his highlight tape, you probably think it is, but there's a lot there that you can't get away with. Again, the guys that are reffing Toledo, if he's the best athlete on the field, you're trying to put, butts in the stands like we were talking about before, you're gonna allow some of that holding, some of that contact at the catch point. I just don't think he's gonna get away with that at this level. There's gonna be a lot of holding calls initially. He's very handsy, but physically, man, you take a chance on that and you just got to refine it. But I don't know if there's a big red flag player this year. I think that Kool-aid McKinstry maybe is the one that I'm a bit worried about. I think he does a lot of things well, and really would be a good addition to your team. I worry about him, taking that leap. I just think athletically a bit more limited than the other guys, and you're really looking for a number one corner. I think that he's probably a number two, which is fine, and if that's the addition you want to make this year. But I think if you're looking for a number one corner, you're looking at those top three guys, and let it be said as well that at 22, if you're drafting best player available, in my opinion, if any of those three are available, they are very likely the best player available. So I think you're fine with any of them. I don't think there's a knock on any of those three. I think obviously scheme fit and stuff like that. You go Wiggins. Terrion Arnold, the only thing, right? Again, mostly probably looked at a slot guy. It's not that he can't play the outside, and he did both. But skill set wise, I just feel like he's a better fit in the slot. Again, the Eagles have Isaiah Rodgers coming to most likely fill that position. So I don't think it's a position of need. So I think you push him to the outside. But I think, Wiggins just kind of slots in a little better there.
Yeah, I think there's kind of pros and cons to most of these guys. It's just making sure that you just kind of, again, weigh those pros and cons. With Keon Mitchell, the biggest thing with me, and I agree that you do have to kind of temper expectations. I appreciate you using verbiage like he's not going to get those calls immediately. Like that's something that as he develops, he will start to get those calls. But yes, right out of the gate, you are going to be looking at a guy who draws a lot of flags. Again, I've talked about Arnold and the susceptibility to the double move that I'm a bit worried about there. Nate Wiggins, I don't want to say I'm not worried about him at all, but
it would be the run game for me. He's just slim. He's going to get bullied a little bit.
I mean, he's very like the easy like reverse comp. It's like he's kind of Devontae Smithish. When you look at this kind of class, just in the sense of like build wise, and he put on some weight. I think he put on like 10 pounds since it was either the beginning of this past season or since the end of last season to now. So he is able to put on weight, which is exciting. But anytime you're talking about a guy who is putting on weight, it's a fine balance to make sure that he can keep that speed. That makes him valuable on top of being able to put on that weight, which will allow him to tackle a bit better and support a lot more in the run game. So, there is that concern for Wiggins. But when you talk about guys a little bit lower down, the one guy who's been occasionally mentioned in the same breath as the Eagles in mock drafts has been Enes Rickershaw, junior out of Mizzou. And he's not a bad player by any means, but you talked about this a little bit with Kool-Aid and how he's not a true number one, and he's not the guy who's going to be that shutdown on the outside. And for me, that's Rickershaw. I just don't see. I see quality potential in him, and his IQ is again immensely high, but I just don't see that ability to fill specifically what the Eagles need. They have solid depth at the cornerback spot. You talk about Isaiah Rodgers is coming back as well next season. The Eagles have really liked what they've seen from Keely Ringo. So again, you're not in a desperate spot for corner. So if you're going to be attacking corner in the first round, it's for a specific type of corner, and that is that elite outside presence. That's why for me, it's one of these top three guys or bust. You can convince me for Kool-Aid, but that's only in a trade down scenario. I can't see them taking him at 22, considering the other players who would be potentially available. And some of those guys even include players who, again, are in at positions of need, but I don't think corners as dire as people may think.
There. So confidence level that the Eagles go cornerback in the first round of the draft, I think I'm at the point where it's kind of just it's a 30% chance. It makes the sense, all the sense in the world for them to do it, but I think one thing to kind of hone in on this offseason is the way that they've all spoken about Isaiah Rodgers. Jeffrey Lurie said it was a very, very good move by Howie Roseman, that Rodgers is a part of their plan going forward. James Bradbury has been spoken highly of, even though I highly believe that he'll be moved on from at some point this offseason. And then I think they really believe in these young guys that they currently have, but I give it a 30% chance. But if they do go cornerback in this draft and they make up for not getting Kyle Hamilton in that one draft where they traded up and they got Jordan Davis instead, I'd be extremely excited to see a guy like Nate Wiggins in Philadelphia for the near future. How you guys feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, confidence-wise, you can never really be sure. It still is the Eagles. It still is Howie Roseman. But I feel a bit more confident this year than in years past where cornerback has made a lot of sense. Like, the difference is for me, I still think there's quite a bit of value in the second round. Again, like I think Zach said, you really are addressing that position to get a number one guy. But that being said, if you want to just add young guys to that group and see who works out, there's options in the second round. So I think that it really depends on how they view the position going forward. Is Keely Ringo your starter? Is he going to stay there? Or is it going to be another one of the, like, I like Eli Ricks as well. Like, I think there's a lot of guys, Josh Jobe, I think you have a lot of young guys. So is that a position of strength that you want to grow, or is that a group of special teamers that you really want to add a number one to? Realistically, I think there's a higher chance that they go edge or offensive line. But that being said, if one of these top three guys follow them, I don't think Howie Roseman second guesses it. I think you grab one.
15%. It's I would love, again, I've talked about Nate Wiggins. I think he's a great fit. Howie is experienced in moving both up and down in the draft, so I think that you can make arguments for trading up for Mitchell, trading down for McKinstry. I think those are all possibilities, sure, but like Morgan, I do think that there is a chance that they act in a bit more predictable of a manner, targeting the defensive line, targeting the offensive line. And, there's guys, there's players, Laiatu Latu from UCLA, the edge rusher, obviously, if he falls to that 22-ish area, because, again, you can never doubt possibly trading up. I think he's obviously a threat to look at. Tyler Guyton's been working out with Lane Johnson. I think that's definitely an offensive lineman to watch, potential right tackle of the future right there. You look at guys like Drazon Newton, if he were to fall to that 20-ish, 22-ish area, I understand that they do like Jalen Carter, and then Jordan Davis has a first-round pedigree, and they're looking for a bit of a bounce back from him this season. But the one benefit of Jalen Carter, and you never quite know what this defense is going to look like under Vic Fangio, but he can play a little bit of edge as well. So, I really don't think that you can rule out taking out a defensive tackle, especially if it's the right tackle, or the correct tackle, I should say. I think that there's a lot of possibilities. And then you just never know about the unpredictability that is a kind of a chess piece like a Cooper DeJean. I do think that there is that remaining possibility, and because I don't really consider him exactly a true corner, although I do believe that he can play corner, I would consider that also a little bit of a different move there myself. So 15% that they go with a corner. It's not. I understand what people may want to hear. It's not necessarily what I want to say, because I do like the ability to add a true shutdown corner going forward. But the benefit is there's a lot of good talent in this draft, and there are some players down in that second round that you could possibly look at corner too.
I think it's highly likely that the Eagles trade for a shutdown corner as opposed to drafting one right before the draft. They have 2 second-round picks. They're very unpredictable when it comes to the trades. Let's not forget the AJ Brown trade. I think that's more likely in my perspective. I could be completely wrong. But I think that's more likely than them drafting a cornerback in the first round.
Well, that they're sitting right by the phone, waiting for Denver to call back. This.
Marshawn Lattimore is also available.
Yeah. Listen, you never know, and the Eagles and Saints do have that trade history together as well, and the possibility remains, and the one thing too, what kind of separates the NFL from the NBA necessarily is that you sometimes don't know when a player is actually available. So you look at some of these situations and who could potentially fall through, and you never know how he could surprise you.
Could he surprise us with Xavier Worthy at 22?
I don't think so.
I'm a big Worthy fan. I am not a big Worthy fan at 22. I'm a big Worthy fan going at the tail end of the first round, specifically to the Chiefs. I think that's a great scenario for him. I don't think that there is the need. I don't think that there is the desire, or I don't think that Worthy has earned being drafted at 22 or traded for around that area. And on top of that, if they're going to draft a receiver in the first round, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but there definitely are potential options. I'm more of a Brian Thomas Jr. kind of a fan. I think that's somebody who kind of fits a bit better for what you're looking to do, and I think he's somebody who can contribute for a lot of years going forward. So, if you're talking about maybe trading down a few picks and taking Thomas, I can be convinced into that. But again, taking a receiver overall is just not in my plans.
To me, Xavier Worthy feels like a team that just got a young quarterback and wants to put some speed. Like, if again, I think Carolina Panthers go offensive line, but I could see them trading back and then grabbing Worthy. I could see him going to like a team like Atlanta, for example, right? Like a team like that where I don't know. Unfortunately, he's going to be great for a not very great team. That's what I see.
Kind of like Jacksonville, somewhere like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, they have to replace.
Arizona is the team that I'm looking at. I think Arizona would be
exactly. Arizona, Jacksonville. They got to replace receivers, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they got to have a consistent quarterback in Arizona first.
It'd be crazy too. Buffalo and perhaps Stephon Diggs finds himself on the move. As has been kind of alluded to all offseason.
If he goes to Buffalo, I feel like it's more so like a Gabe Davis replacement than a Stephon Diggs. Because I mean, they're imagine getting rid of your best wide receiver and having no wide receiver.
They don't know what they're doing at receiver. That's always been the case.
Ask the Vikings how that works, though, right? Vikings did this exact same thing and got Justin Jefferson. So you never know, right?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, well, speaking of wide receivers, something that we did not get to cover last week that happened. Paris Campbell coming to the Eagles on a 1-year deal. I personally feel like that is a huge move and actually a pretty damn good steal off of free agency. The guy can play in a slot. When he's healthy, he's on. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say it's a significant upgrade over Quez, but it's a pretty good upgrade over Quez if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. You talk about Zach Pascal and what he was, able to do, and I think that this is, if he can consistently contribute in his role, his upside is ridiculous. Like, this is a running back that can run routes like a receiver, and he's a hard tackle in space. He can run the entire route tree. Just been inconsistent, and he comes to a situation where the Eagles don't really need him to be consistent for any time, right? They just need him to come through with some timely downs and make some good catches, and he's definitely capable of doing that. I think this is a really underrated pickup, man. I think that was a really, really good move.
I think that was a steal. How do you feel,
I would agree. I don't necessarily think of him as an upgrade over Kes Watkins, more so because I try not to think about Kes Watkins, but I think about it as almost like as a massive upgrade over Olamide Zaccheaus. And I loved having Zaccheaus, but he is that a lot more position versatile type of receiver, and Morgan, like you said, even almost kind of that running back that can run routes. So that optionality that you're now going to have, and being able to do that with Saquon Barkley and also with Paris Campbell is, I mean, if Kellen Moore is given the keys, and I know that he's not exactly lit the league on fire in the past, but the potential is there for an absolutely elite offense top to bottom. So I think he's going to be, barring a rather high pick at receiver, which again I'm not fully expecting. I think he's going to be your wide receiver 3 entering the year, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great look for the offense. I think, I don't want to say missing piece, but it's going to be a significant piece for the offense going forward. So we covered cornerback. Next week we'll cover another position. We'll keep this going until the draft. I know Eric couldn't make it on the show, but he did want to say that he's out. He's pretty high on Kool-aid McKinstry. Hopefully I pronounced that right. After Zach and Morgan said that they're not high on Kool-aid McKinstry, but
I like him, just not at 22. Like, that's the thing. It's like, if you're just looking at it from a talent perspective, I just have people on my board, and again, I don't think corner is a live or die need, especially if you're not getting a shutdown corner.
Fair game. But yeah, I mean, appreciate everybody joining us on the pod today. You guys have been consistently just delivering the good vibes to us per se. I mean, we've over the past couple of weeks have had over 200 people viewing in average, which is phenomenal in the off season. So shout out to all you guys that are joining us. Make sure you guys catch us live next week, 7:30 p.m. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett, Zach Chavalella, and we're Flipping the Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Flipping the birds. Flipping the birds.